Welcome to Immigrant. Welcome to a space where you can be vulnerable, a space where you're not going to be judged, a space where you can be authentic. And my hope and desire is to inspire and motivate everyone that click onto this podcast. So welcome to another episode of Immigrate. Welcome to another great episode of Immigrate. I wanted to do a part two of building a healthy relationship as an immigrant or building a healthy relationship with boundaries. And while I was on my way to do this recording, the Holy Spirit said to me, Tasha, talk about Daniel and his friends. And when I got to my studio, I started researching on Daniel and his friends. And I was like, Lord, why do you want me to talk about Daniel and his friends? And let's just talk about the brief little history that I know. Daniel and his friends were about from 13 to about 18 years old. And the Bible mentioned young men, right? So when they were captive, they were about 13 to 18-year old. And one of the things I've realized that among the Bible, so we're going to talk from Daniel 1 verses 1 to 6 or 1 to 8, the story where I want us to go. And I will be going through chapter by chapter. And the reason I'm taking a little different approach on this episode, because in everything that we do, the Bible teaches us about every single thing. And Daniel and his friends are a perfect example of how when we have friends and have healthy boundaries within a friend, even when we travel, because remember, Daniel and his friends were captured. They were immigrants in another country, right? A lot of people by force or whatever the situation is. So when they were captured, the officials asked for, they were young and they have good reputation. So their background in verses 3, it talks about the royal family of noble family. So these young men were raised pretty well. And they mentioned they were handsome, they're intelligent, well trained, quick to learn, and free from physical defects. Nothing on their body has to do it. So their outward appearance was from the elite class. So, for example, say you're from the uptown or you're from a richer class or whatever, right? And they would be qualified to serve in the royal court, right? And he went on to start talking about this is how the story unfolds. So, as I said, the Bible talks about young men. So, they were pretty young. And even though these men were taken away from their families, their family obviously taught them well. So when these young men were gone into Babylon system, they changed their culture, they changed their name, they changed everything about them. So by then they were given new names. I might pronounce them wrong. Daniel, Ananiah, Messiah, Azariah. So all their names, well, these were their names before. So they were a tribe of Judah. But when they changed their name were Belshazzar. Anyway, I'm not gonna bite my tongue, but Abednego, we know the names. So they were all names were changed into Babylonian names, right? So while they went into the country, they were adopted, they were changed. One of the things that stood out to me in this story as it goes into verses 6 and verse 7. Verse 7 talks about how their names were changed. Right? Some of the things I liked about Daniel was how he was so grounded in his boundaries. It says in verse 8, and I might go further down, but in verse 8 it says, Daniel made up his mind not to let himself become ritual unclean by eating food and drink the wine of the royal court. Remember, obviously these young men were brought up to not eat unclean meat, right? They were Jewish. They were brought up that way. And their custom, they don't drink anything alcohol based, right? That's how they were brought up. But Daniel already knew that he's not going to do that. So he asks his servant, or he's asked the person that's in charge of them, saying, can you tell the king this? And the servant was empathetic to what Daniel was saying. But of course, this servant or the king was scared to tell the one who is in command say, hey, this is Daniel's request. This is what I want us to realize right here. Stick and the word and as I'm going through, we're studying together. So I have no notes. This is us reasoning together on the podcast about the understanding of how these things work. And the reason is that when we have rooted our culture and our traditions, when we move to another country, we should not let that change. Adapting is fine, but Daniel made up in his mind that he will not succumb to the food culture there because he knew what he was getting into. I'm sure, remember, Daniel was a young man. As I said earlier, Daniel was between 13 to 18-year old, right? So he was pretty young. So already Daniel had principle of how he would do certain things, right? So then they threaten him. And when you have your boundaries, sometimes it can be pushback. So the king pushed back on it and said, well, if you don't do it, they might kill you. And verses 11 continue. David said, okay, I'm giving you an ultimatum. Okay. So this is where another aspect of boundaries happen. A lot of times I find that when we move to another country, it is okay for us to adapt, but doesn't mean that we have to conform. Daniel did not conform, but he adapted. His circumstances were forced upon him, but he adapted to the culture. He never conformed. So when we look here, we realize that Daniel said to the guard, right, that was placed in charge of him and his three friends, he gave him an ultimatum and said, give us a test. Daniel said, I'm going to prove to you what I was raised with is the way we're going to stick to. Sometimes we're easily influenced when we are around certain company. I'll give an example. Growing up, I was easily influenced, right? I could remember going to high school. I used to have a lot of friends who was not Christian, and I was easily influenced. But one thing I never do, my friends will always get into trouble, but I would not. Because not because I had a strict mom, but because there was a conscience behind my back was always like, don't do that. Don't go so far in. So part of me, even though I had friends who were influencing me, I still wouldn't go too much depth. So sometimes my friends will say, why are you scared? Why are you acting like you're better than us? And it wasn't that I was acting like I was better than them. It was that I knew what my mom taught me. And if I even go too deep, there was consequences that comes with that. And I would not want that consequence. So this consequence came and this ultimatum in verses 12, it says, so I guess we're going deeper. It says, test us for 10 days, he said. Give us vegetable to eat and water to drink. That was the ultimatum. Then David said again, look at this. And I want to emphasize here young people who move to a country and thinking that they have to become, you have to smoke, you have to drink, you have to party. When I moved here, I'm going to be honest, I went to the club once. I'm going to be honest. And when I went there, I said, this is not for me. I was a Christian, but I was influenced. I was influenced badly. But when I went there, I said, why am I doing this? This is not me. This is not my thing. And I'm glad to say that I went there, I saw it, I never liked it. And this will go to show that the second point is sometimes we think we have to prove to people that we want to be in a certain company, right? We don't have to prove anything to anybody. So here Daniel is saying, give us vegetable to eat and water to drink. Verse 13 said, then compare us with young men who are eating the food of the royal court and base a decision on how we look. So Daniel is saying, give us the food from our forefathers. Give us the food that God tell us to eat. I'm not here and saying vegetable is better or whatever, but David is saying, give us vegetable and water for us to drink and see how it works out. Let us stick to our culture and see what happens. Compare us. Listen, I'm putting my boundaries there. It's either you accept it or not. This is my boundaries, and this is what I'm asked, and this is what I'm telling you to do. Accept it or not. Of course they agreed on it, because guess what? When people realize that your boundaries are strict, they have no choice. And I mean, the Bible didn't mention it, but I'm sure in the back of their mind, they're like, there's no way these men gonna survive. There's absolutely no way. What? Vegetable water? That's it? You're gonna eat for 10 days and see what happens? Remember, the guard already told them that if they don't, they might be killed. So in the background, there are young men saying, we're gonna test our code and see. My parents has brought me up and show me. And I want to pause here because a lot of sometimes when we raise a certain way and we move into country, we follow people, as I said. We start smoking, we start drinking. We don't have to. I was having a conversation with my husband the other day and I said to him, how have you've been raised in Canada and you've never smoked, you've never drink, never party. And he said to me, those things were never an interest of him. That's what he says. And I said, wow, look at it. So even though it's a high population where people tend to do things like that here, he was not something that he was interested in. Anyway, let's move on. And it says, verse 14, as I said, they agreed to try it for the 10 days. When the time was up, listen this now. You see, when you stick to your boundaries and you stick to whatever your goals and your boundaries are, nothing. Let me tell you something. Sometimes, and this also have to do with faith, sometimes boundaries is not easy, especially when you're in a difficult situation. Daniel and his friends prove that, listen, when I have healthy boundaries and healthy direction, the Lord will help me. I remember when as I said in my previous one, because this is part two, when I started learning about boundaries, it was difficult, but I stick it out. And sometimes people may not understand why you're doing what you're doing, but look at it. It says in verse 15, they became healthier and stronger than those who eat of the royal food. So when you stick to your boundaries and you stick to the root, the traditions and all the things that your parents have taught you into, you're gonna become better. You have healthier time for yourself. You make better decisions. You become better. And then someone's like, why is she so strict with her boundaries? It's not easy. But when you portray that healthy boundaries in friendship or as a person on a whole, it it helps a better life for you. You're even happier. You're no longer walking around have to worry about what someone else think about you. Because guess what? The Lord has helped you to develop that in you for over a period of time. Healthy boundaries takes time. With Daniel and his friends, it took 10 days for them. But healthy boundaries take time. Over time, it works. But once you stick to it, you become stronger. You become healthier in your habits. So from then on, the guards just continue and let them eat vegetable instead of what the king provides. So there you go. When you maintain your boundaries, people have no choice but to respect you. And the reason they have to respect you because you have respect yourself. You cannot expect someone to respect you when you have no respect for yourself. So when you move into a country, you respect them internal, you teach them how to treat you. How are we expecting someone to respect us and to love us and to treat us the way we deserve that God said we should? Because remember, he said he loves us unconditionally. So with that love, it means that no matter what we do, God still loves us. But how will we expect to love ourselves if we don't show people that we deserve that love too? The way we talk to ourselves sometimes, the way we dress, the way we look at people, the things that comes out of our mouth is sometimes not healthy. And as I said in verse 4, they have proven themselves that this is my boundaries. I have tested it. I have tried it. I've worked on it for a period of time. And this is who I am. And God will do the rest, right? Verse 17 says, God gave the four young men knowledge in skills in literature and philosophy. In addition, he gave Daniel the skill of interpreting vision. And I want to stop right here. And the reason I want to stop right here, you know what I've learned? When we develop healthy boundaries, we start hearing the voice of God speaking through us. And with these healthy boundaries, it's hard. You kind of feel like you're being selfish, but it creates such a mirror or a blindfold that you stay in your lane and you focus on you and what God has given you. And you start hearing clearly what God has purpose for you. You start saying to yourself, okay, God, what is it? What is there for me now? What do you want me to do? You know, sometimes in the morning I wake up, I will ask God, what do you want me to do today, Lord? Sometimes I hear cricket, like nothing. And sometimes I'm saying, Tasha, get up, go to the student, da 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 da, like this morning. So when you trust God with every single thing in your life, He will allow you to be fluent in your purpose. He will allow you to walk confident, not worrying about what people will say or think about you. I do encourage you to read it in depth and in prayerfully. Daniel 1 verse 1 to 17, about how it is so important when you have friends and you build in friendships. Because listen, these friends could have said to Daniel, we're not doing that. And one just thing the Holy Spirit just brought me, be careful of the friends you have around you. Because what if Daniel or his friends has influenced him to be like, we're not doing that. I got captured. I'm scared. No. Daniel was the one that led the friends, and then they all agreed. So sometimes we have to be careful with the people that we have around us, what they're telling us to do. Does it align with our culture? Does not just culture, but does it align with what God wants for our lives? In this case, culture and alignment with God worked because they stick to what they knew, and they knew what they knew was what God wanted them to know, to do too. So I want to encourage you, friends, as I do a follow up, and I said this is part two of last week episode talking about building healthy relationship with immigrants. Because the important part of it is that as we're building, let's not lose ourselves. As I said, we don't have to succumb or do the things that they said we're doing because we have to feel like we have to fit in. You don't have to. It took me years to learn that, and I mentioned how I got in myself into certain things, but then I had to regroup and understand that building healthier relationship and boundaries keep me so grounded. It keeps you grounded. It makes you love yourself more. That even no matter what the outside world may say, and that outside world may look like family, friends, church people, whatever they say, sometimes it does not disturb me because you have now understand your purpose. You understand who God called you to be. You understand what He calls you to do, and it doesn't matter what He calls you to do. Once you stick, and sometimes God take you on a journey. He will take you for years and build. Because as you read furthermore in the story, you can see how much more Daniel became more advanced into his skills of all the things that God called him to do. So it's not an overnight thing, thinking that, okay, it was just 10 days. And no, he became more. The story became more depth where it talks about they challenge God. And as I said, the more you stick to your boundaries, God just teach you how to hear Him. And I can't stress it no more. How much of us as Christians know how God speaks through us? Sometimes we need to sit in our closet and learn about Jesus and understand His ways. And that might take in boundary setting, because some of the things I realize that with people and friendship, that people don't respect other people's boundaries, right? And we talk about them in it, but in this, we don't respect people's boundaries. It's because you don't respect yourself. How can you be late if someone say meet me at 10 and you show up at 10:20? You don't respect your friends. You don't respect that person. How can someone say, I'm confidentially telling you something, but you go tell someone else? How can someone say, I'm lending you, say for example, I'm lending you $5, and then when the person's ready for it, you're saying, I don't have it to give you back. The list goes on and on and on. But moving into a country, understanding how Christ wants us to be, and understanding that we need to respect people's boundaries, people's way of life, and we don't have to change our own belief and thinking that we have to become like the system to be perfect. No, we don't have to. I mentioned a couple episodes on how every time I meet someone, they always don't think I'm Jamaican. And it's something that still bothers me. Till one time I was with some my friends and they were doing some stuff. I won't give too much information because people might pick up. But they were with, and the lady was from Jamaica, and I was introducing myself, and she looked at me twice, and she's like, "You're Jamaican?" I said, "Yeah." "Are you?" I said, "Yeah." And I said, "Why?" "You don't sound Jamaican at all." And it was so like my friend looked at me and she saw, because she know, to the point where when I went back to Jamaica, because that's where my I'm from, when I speaking to people, even when I speak the tongue of the even if when I speak Jamaican or Patois, people still don't believe. I remember when we went to the hotel and people didn't believe until days and say, "Oh, you're really Jamaican," because my accent started coming out more. People don't believe that I am. But it's just, the point is, sometimes when you get adapt into a culture, I don't change all of me. I it just become, I didn't come and say, "Oh, I'm moving to Canada and I want to change my accent." No. You're adapting to the culture, and then eventually you lose your accent. And that's okay, but doesn't lose who you are. As we read in the beginning, how Daniel's name was changed. They had to adapt. Their culture was changed. Their names were changed. They were taught the culture language, but their principle and their values did not change. I still have some deep rooted principle, and I'll end with this story. When I was 18, I think, left high school, my mom decided, okay, it's time for you to figure out what you need to do, and I'm going to send you to a school. No, at the time in Jamaica we had these, like, I think train, I don't remember, but anyway, my mom would send me to this thing, and we went away for like a month. 1 month we went away for. And I was 18 at the time. And I'm telling you, before I went, my mom will wake us up in the morning. I will get to school early, but I will never get back home on time. I would be always late for things, and my mom was just tired of me not having the skill set that I need. To the point that she was so worried that I would never survive in society, because she said, "Why are you always late? Why are you always making excuses?" It's like I was not motivated as a child to do anything. So my mom decided to send me to this boot camp. And on this boot camp we went. We were all supposed to 6 hours away from my house. So we drive there, and we were not allowed to have cell phone there. If we want to make calls to our parents, we have to go on the system phone. And the army was the one who would train us into habits. So we were supposed to go and learn. So for 1 month, you're gonna learn a skill that you can take into the world and possibly get employed by. Not knowing what I was going to, that's all I knew. But I'm telling you, it was one of the hardest things I had to do. I had to get up at 4 a.m. We had to exercise in the cold, and this was in Mandeville. So anybody know Jamaica? It's a cold, like, to the mountains, so it's colder there. So we were in a colder part where only thing you saw in that area was just fog everywhere, and it was just fog. And one of the mornings we would get up early to exercise. At that time, trust me, I did not like it, but we had to make our beds. That was something I did not like, because we had to make our beds. They will come and inspect our beds. They'll come and inspect our environment before we leave. And when we go to school, we have to get up and stand, because someone walk in, we have to stand. And one of the things that we had to do, we cannot be late for anything. Rules, let me tell you, I will say it. I did not like rules. I always said rules are made to break. And when I went to that camp, of course the girl got into trouble, because there was lots of rules. So the girls would sit on one side and the boys would sit on one side. So it was very, very intense thing. There was a thing that says, to be on time is to be ahead of time. And I'm telling you, I remember one day I was late because I woke up late. Remember, they will wake you up, but sometimes you don't really have to. But anyway, I got up late. I got to the class, because every day you'll have class for different stuff. So by the end, you pick one area that you want to go into. So I did early childhood. So I had a class for early childhood, and I was late for that. The punishment I got, it was so hard. And I remember the guy says, to be on time is to be ahead of time. Up to this day, my friends will tell you, if you're late, I don't like it. To the point where it's funny. My husband is a time person. He likes to go anywhere on time. And it was so refreshing to know that he was like that, because when we met, I assumed that he didn't know time, right? But then he instilled that in me, and the older I'm getting, I don't like to be late for anything, because I always think that if you're late, you don't respect the person, you don't respect the person's time. It doesn't matter who it is. But I wanted to just share that to say sometimes when we move and we do things, we carry our own principle. So me here in Canada, I'm always early for things. And the older I'm getting, I start even showing up for church early, because I'm like, if I'm early for work, I should be early for church. Of course, things will happen. But one of the things I want to encourage you and say, I pray that this podcast is a little longer than my normal podcast. But I pray that this podcast will give you some freedom and saying, how can I understand how to have healthy relationships with my friends, or a healthy relationship as an immigrant, by creating healthy boundaries in the Bible? Here you go. There's a story that depicts by that. And I really pray that the Lord may bless you as you listen and understand that you don't have to change who you are because you're in a new country. The Lord will always teach you how He wants you to be. So, thank you guys for listening to another great episode of Immigrant. I know this is a little longer episode, but I feel like the Lord wanted someone to hear this and someone to understand why is it important. So that's why I decided to do part 2. So thank you again for listening to another great episode. Hey fam, thank you for listening to that last episode. If you have been inspired by what I just shared, can you do me a favor? Can you just share this with someone that you know might be beneficial? Guess what too? My logo on my video. Follow me on YouTube. I need some followers on YouTube. Follow me on Instagram by Immigrant Podcast. Follow me on Spotify by Immigrant Podcast. Follow me on YouTube by Immigrant Podcast. Just share it. Share it with anyone you know. Share with any family member that you know who might be or may not be struggling with it. But share this podcast. And I look forward to share many more episodes with you. Thank you for listening. Bye.